Welcome to the second part of this series. In this video I'll show you how to create a simple script so you can control this cube. If you didn't see the last video, we created a plane and a cube. One thing you need to do is freeze the rotation on the X and Z axis. I will explain later why. And we also create two materials, one for the floor, one for the cube. Let's organize our project first. Create a new folder and name it materials. And drag both that we created there. Create a new folder and call it scripts. Open it and create C# script. Call it player movement. Double click it to open. It will probably open MonoDevelop or Visual Studio if you have it. I use Visual Studio. Now I'm going to teach you how to create a simple script. Don't worry, it will be simple. When you first open, you have two functions, start and update. Start is called when the game is started. So when you press play, it's called first. Then update is called every frame. So if the game is running at 60 FPS, it's called 60 frames per second. So this runs 60 times. Let's start by creating some variables. On top here, write public float speed, public float rotation speed, and max speed. We also need another one, private rigid body, If you don't know anything about programming, I'll start explaining a little bit. So a float means it's a number and it can take decimal numbers. For example, 1.25, 3.5, 5 divided by 3. It can take all these numbers. Variables can be either public or private. If they are public, you'll be able to see them in the inspector. So if you go back to the Unity, let it load, you drag the player movement to the cube, and if you click it, on the inspector you can see the variables we've created. These three are public, the other one is private. You can delete these comments. So we have this rigid body, and you want it to have a reference to the rigid body of the cube. To do that, you can either make it public, and then you drag the rigid body to the slot, like so, or you can make it private, and on the start you are going to tell that rigid body is equal to get component. This will automatically get the rigid body of the object. You don't need to drag it. Now let's make the object rotate with the arrow keys. On the update function, write GameObject transform rotate 0 dot input get axis horizontal times rotation speed times time dot delta time, comma 0. So let's see what this does. This will rotate the object, and you can rotate it in 3 axes, X, Y, and Z. X and Z we want to see the same, so we write 0. the only one we want to rotate is the y-axis. So if you go to the Unity, you select the cube. Here on the inspector, if you rotate on the Y, we can see it rotating like we want to. If you rotate the others, it will get weird, so the others want to keep at 0 and change only this one. Input get axis horizontal means the arrow keys left and right, or A and D, times rotation speed, it's up here. It will be how fast it will rotate when we press the keys. And time delta delta time means that he will rotate constantly, no matter how slow or fast your computer is. Now if you save, select the cube, give a rotation speed, let's say 80, and now you press play. If you press the arrow keys, you can see that the cube rotates now. You can change the speed, maybe faster or slower. And that's it. Now let's make it move. Open the script again. Go to the update function and write if input dot get key keycode dot space rigid body dot add force transform forward times speed. What this does is, if you press space, this line of code will run, otherwise it will jump ahead and not read it. So with add force to the rigid body forward times the speed we choose. So if you go back to the Unity and get a speed like, let's say 60, if we now press play, okay, maybe that's way too fast. Let's change it to maybe 5. Okay, if you press space, you can see it moves now. But if you let go the space, it will keep moving a bit. If you want this, it's fine. If you want it to stop at the moment you let go the space, let's go back to the code and let's add else rigid body velocity equals to vector 3 0. This means that if you're not pressing space, the velocity will be 0. If you go back to Unity and play, if you let go space, it will just stop. Let's increase the plane size so we don't fall. Let's say 50. It's big enough. You can see it moving around. Let's do one thing so we know where he's looking at. Because if you now try to move it, you kinda don't know where the front is or whatever. So select the cube, right click, 3D object, select a... Let's go with a sphere. Now drag it a little bit on the Z axis, like so. Because the sphere is a child of the cube, if you move the cube, the sphere will go along. Now if you press play, you can kinda see where the forward is, where the front is. If you didn't freeze the rotation on the Z and X axis, when you will try to move it, this would happen. So yeah, it's very important that you freeze the rotation. Now I'm going to give you some homework. I want you to add something to this script so that when you press the letter R, the cube resets to the default position. So this needs to happen. So you walk around, you press R, and it goes back to the start. I'm going to give you a hint. Take a look on Unity documentation on the part of transforms. Well, and that's all. See you next part.